Hello everyone and welcome to today's English session. So today we will be discussing a very important topic of grammar, that is verbs, right? So as we all know that verb is one of the 8 parts of speech. Now let us further talk about verbs in detail. Let us first understand what verbs actually are. We've been studying that action words are called verbs, right? So for example, John plays guitar. So here the word plays show action. So the word plays is a verb showing action. It's an action word. But not only this, verb further shows few more things. Let's see them. So words showing being. Now let us understand this through example. Words which show being. For example, the children were happy. So the word, the word were shows being, isn't it? The children were happy, the state. And here also, in the next case, words showing possession. So, words which show possession, they are also verbs. So, let's see this. Let us understand it better through this example sentence. I have a doll. So, the word have here shows possession, right? It is showing possession. I have a doll. I possess a doll. This is my doll. So the word have is showing possession, right? So finally we conclude that verbs not only show action, they show being as well as possession. Further, we will talk about transitive and intransitive verbs. Then we'll discuss auxiliary and main verbs. And finally, weak and strong verbs, right? So let us first talk about transitive and intransitive verb. Now, before we start with transitive and intransitive, let us first understand object. What is an object, right? The object of a sentence. Fine. Now, we've already studied before that a sentence has a subject. The subject is the doer of the action, isn't it? Or we may say whatever we speak in the sentence, about whom we speak in the sentence, that's the subject. And whatever we tell about the subject, that's the predicate. So just leave aside predicate right now. Just focus on subject. So subject is the one about whom we are talking in the sentence, or we can also, in other words, we can say subject is the one who is performing the action, the doer of the action. So here in this sentence, I kicked the football. I is the subject, right? Why I is the subject? Because the action is being performed, the action is being done by I, right? So I is the doer of the action. So that's the subject. Now next step is to find out who is receiving the action. Who is the receiver of the action, right? And how do we find it out? By asking question of what and whom. Either what or whom. If we get the answer, that means the receiver is mentioned in the sentence. So let's find out. So I kicked the ball. I kicked what? What is the answer that we are getting? the football. When we ask a question to the verb, right? I kicked what? And remember, always remember, the question words should be what and whom. Fine. So, when we ask a question, I kicked what? The answer that we get is the football. That means the football is the receiver of the action. Fine. And whoever receives the action, the receiver of the action performed by the subject is known as object of the sentence. So I hope subject and object is very clear to everyone. And let me repeat once again, how do we find out the object? By asking a question of what or whom. Let me give you an example with whom also. I played with her. Right. Again, I is the subject. I'm playing with her. She's my friend. I'm playing with her. So, I is the subject. Now, again, the second step is to find out the receiver of the action. So, here who's receiving the action? How do we find out? By asking a question of what or whom. So, here let's let's find out the object or the receiver of the action. So let us ask a question. I played with whom? I played with whom? And the answer that we get is her. So her is the object of the sentence. I hope this much is crystal clear to everyone. Now, let's get back to transitive and intransitive verb. It's very easy to understand once you have understood object. Fine. So now that you have understood object, it's very easy to find out whether the verb is transitive or intransitive. Right? Let's see how. So, here in these sentences, the object is there, right? These sentences have object. So here in such case, we'll say that the verb is transitive, right? In these sentences, since the objects are there, so the verbs here are transitive. Which kind of verbs? Of course, transitive verbs, right? So, kicked and played. These are transitive verbs. Why are they transitive verbs? Because they have an object. Fine. Now, obviously, intransitive verb would be those verbs where there is no object, isn't it? Now let us see this with the help of an example. See these two sentences. The child cried. And the second example is the sun rises in the east. Fine. Now let us focus on the first sentence. The child cried. The child cried what? Any answer? No answer. The child cried whom? Any answer? No answer. So, this sentence has no receiver. That means, receiver of the action. The child is the subject and there is no object in this sentence. Fine? So, the verb is intransitive. Right? We'll call this verb intransitive verb. Why? Because there is no object in this sentence. Right? Now look at the second example, second sentence here I have given. It says, the sun rises in the east. Now, most of you will say east is the object, but no, it's not the object. Why? Because I told you earlier only that to find out the object, we put up a question of what or whom, right? Nothing else. What or whom. So if we ask a question to the subject, the sun rises what? Will we get any answer? No. The sun rises whom? Any answer? No, of course not. So now, when do we get this as answer? The sun rises where? Then we will get the answer in the east. But for object, finding out the object, we use only two question words. That is what and whom. We do not consider where, isn't it? So, in the east cannot be the object of the sentence, right? So here again the same thing. The sun rises in the east. The verb rises is intransitive verb. So I hope this is very clear to everyone. Transitive with object. Intransitive, no object. Fine. Now let's proceed to main verb and auxiliary verb. So, as the name indicates, main verb, it shows the main action that is being performed in the sentence. For example, he is playing happily. So, the main action, the action performed in this sentence is playing, right? So, playing is the main verb. Now, apart from this, we have another verb in the same sentence. Now, if we say he playing happily, so will it be a correct sentence? Will the sentence be complete? Of course not. We have to use is here. But when we use he is playing happily, this makes the sentence complete. So, the verb is helping the main verb. So, since it is helping the main verb, therefore it is known as auxiliary or helping verb, right? Now, next thing to understand is an auxiliary verb can also be used as a main verb. How? Let's see. He is happy. So here is acts as a main verb, right? Similarly, do stop that noise. Here the auxiliary verb again has been used to put more stress. So apart from being used as a main verb, an auxiliary verb also adds stress, makes the sentence more forceful, right? So if we say stop that noise, the sentence is complete. But when we add this auxiliary here, do stop that noise, it makes the sentence more powerful, more effective, right? With a more force, right? Similarly, another use of auxiliary is to ask questions. So we use auxiliary verbs, the helping verbs, for asking questions as well. See how? Do they know him? So here do is asking the question, isn't it? So do has been, the auxiliary do has been placed in the beginning of the sentence for putting up a question, right? So I hope the difference between main verb and auxiliary verb is clear to all of you. Main verb shows the action, whereas auxiliary verb can act as a main verb. It can be used to put more stress to the sentence or make the sentence more forceful, and it can also be used in question form, right? Now let us proceed to weak and strong verbs. One thing to keep in mind when we talk about weak verbs and strong verbs is that the distinction between a weak verb and a strong verb is based on how the past form and the past participle form of the verb is formed, right? I hope you understand the past and the past participle form. When we look at the word table, the first list, the first column is of the base form, that is present tense. Then the next column shows past tense, and the third column shows past participle form, right? So, weak verbs, let us first understand the weak verbs. Weak verbs, these are also known as regular verbs, right? They are also known as regular verbs. And they form the past tense by adding ed, d or t to the base form, right? ed, d or t to the base form. Now, let us see the example. Act, acted, acted. So, we are adding ed in the past and the past participle form, right? So, here also we are adding ed here as well as ed in the past participle form. So, arrive, arrived, arrived. So, verbs, they form their past and the past participle form by adding d, ed or t to the base form, right? While on the other hand, strong verbs, these are also known as irregular verbs. And how are they formed? They form the past tense or the past participle form in various ways, but most often by changing the vowel of the present tense, that is the base form, right? By changing the vowel. For example, awake, awoke, awaken. So the vowel gets changed. Similarly, the easiest and the best example to understand here is the verb sing. So in the base form, the word is sing. The past form is sang. So the vowel changes to I, changes to A. And in past participle form, the vowel changes to U. So the three forms are sing, sang and sung, right? So this is the basic difference between weak verbs and strong verbs. So I hope the topic is very, very clear to you. Go through the notes given in your workbook, and we'll meet again in the next session with some other topic. Till then, bye bye.